Okay. All right. Well, good morning. Before we get started with the formal part of our presentation, definitely want to do just quick introduction so I can get an idea and feel for who's in the room and the organization or type of organization that you all represent. So if we want to start with Alicia, we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Alicia Ryan. I'm a public policy major at the University of Baltimore, and I work for the Upton Planning Committee, primarily with the historic Pennsylvania Avenue Main Street, which is a community development corporation that serves an underserved area of Baltimore.
Awesome. Kelly? I don't know if she's back yet. I think she had stepped away for a second. Okay, Brian? Brian, if you want to introduce yourself. If not, that's fine. All right, Janelle?
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Janelle Hawan. I'm actually a student at the University of Baltimore in my senior year. So this is my final semester, and I'm studying polity, politics, and international affairs. And I'm really happy to be here and to just learn a lot from you today. So thank you very much.
Awesome, awesome. Welcome, welcome, especially to our students. Brian and Kelly, if you are able to unmute yourself and just say hello, that would be great. Okay, well, I'm going to share my screen. And also ping my colleague to make sure she has the proper link to join. Oh, there she is. Great.
Hello, I'm so sorry. I was placed in a different breakout room and I was just put in here.
No worries, Ceci. I was just about to get started, so you are right on time.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good. All right, so today's discussion, we are discussing creating meaningful community engagement, a tactical guide. So I want to just, both myself and Ceci wants to thank COMPA for allowing us to present this very important topic. Before we go into the presentation, my name is Anne-Marie Sorrell. I'm the president and CEO of the Mosaic Group, and we're an award-winning advertising, marketing, and PR firm. We work with organizations across the country as well as in the Caribbean. And we'll learn more about some of the work that we do as we talk through this particular subject matter, which is one of our core areas of expertise. Ceci?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ceci Dadisman, and I work with Anne-Marie at the Mosaic Group. And I'm happy to be able to share with you some of the techniques that we use and experience that we have had in creating really meaningful engagement with various communities today.
Awesome. So we'll go ahead and get started. So creating meaningful community engagement, a tactical guide. What we'll be exploring today is creating a bespoke strategy, creating successful communication channels and messaging, grassroots methods that actually work, and data collection that demonstrates results. So why is this important? I'm going to let Ceci kind of take us into why this is important, especially when we talk about the importance of data and matrix, but just ensuring that you're actually effectively reaching communities.
Yeah, this is so important because, you know, as an industry, we tend to use a lot of anecdotal data, right? And we tend to say, oh, well, this has worked in the past or this hasn't worked in the past, where really we need to get to a point that we have real data that we're looking at, that we're using as measures of success, of efficacy, and you know, the current state of the industry and also just, you know, human behavior, we have to be able to shift and change and be reactive to that. So what we're going to talk about today in terms of how we engage various communities, what data we collect, what messaging we use, what channels we use, is increasingly important for us to continue to be on the leading edge of these techniques.
Absolutely. And also just add to that, you know, people have so many distractions. And especially when we talk about engaging community in public awareness type campaigns, civic type campaigns, it is not the easiest work. And those of you who are studying public policy will learn that, because people have different views, different experiences, different things that speaks to them and tugs at their heartstring, different issues that impact them in different ways because based on their lived experiences or their perceptions. So it's a very delicate process. It is a very consuming process to try to understand your different audiences. So those are the things that we're going to take you through today. For most organizations, they tend to do the same thing over and over and over again and continue to get the same results. And particularly in the public sector, it's oftentimes a lack of participation in various issues and initiatives, or a lack of information, or not understanding the various channels to get the information out. And so, you know, like, for example, we were working with the organization, and prior to us coming in and doing a survey, we did a survey, and within 3 weeks, with our techniques, we got over 1,000 results. And the organization was like, wow, we've had a survey out for a year and we've gotten less than 200 participants. You know, how did you all do it? And so those are some of the things we're going to share. So doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is truly the definition of insanity. And so a lot of organizations continue to do that because they don't, you know, either understand, know, or have the wherewithal to go and try something different to get a different result. What we found is the most effective strategy is born out of inclusive, equitable, accessible, and meaningful engagement. And we're going to touch on all of these and it's going to be woven into our presentation, our case studies that we'll present to you. So the first thing with community engagement is understanding who is in your community. And I'm not just talking about just the people itself, but really understanding all of your various constituents. Who are your residents? What are their demographics? What speaks to them? What are their interests? What are their behaviors? Where do they live? Why do they live there? Where do they shop? Where do they dine? All those different experiences, right? Understanding the businesses that make up your community, your visitors, your tourists, the surrounding neighborhoods and cities around you and how they impact your community, and things that they do sometimes impact your community. Your faith leaders, your community leaders, your advocates, your influencers, your elected bodies and government officials, your nonprofit organizations, your educational institutions, and all your civic partners. These are all constituents that make up your community. And you're having meaningful engagement oftentimes involve communicating with all of these constituents in some way, form, or fashion in order to reach your goals and objectives. Then we want to, ask you a few questions, or questions that you should ask yourself. What are you trying to accomplish? Right? What is it that when you set out to do a community engagement initiative, what is it that you are trying to accomplish? And then it's important to set communication goals and objectives and what the expected outcomes are. So starting with the end in mind is how we like to work. Like, what do you want to accomplish from this? What are the outcomes on day 20 or 30 or day 365? What do you want that outcome to be? And then we work backwards by setting those goals and objectives to achieve the outcome. And then knowing what the community wants or needs. And sometimes you don't know right away. So we're going to talk about tactics on how you can gain understanding of what the community really want and what they need. Oftentimes in the public sector, especially, professionals and consultants will say, well, we think the community wants this because of whatever data they may have, gained from a census or something maybe tracking a certain way from, like, let's just say, a health disparity or something. So because of that, we think the community wants or needs this, but no one ever actually asked the community, right? And then we get into what's the why, right? What is the purpose or cause or reason for doing it? But more importantly, what's their why? Not just your why, but understanding the community that you represent and why it's important to them or even necessary for them. A lot of people are just going day to day, working or going to school or just, trying to just live their lives, and they're not as engaged in different things. Or sometimes, not that they don't care, but it's a matter of, at that point, is it relevant to them? Is it important at that point? Does it take precedent over other things that may be happening in their lives? So why is it important to them or even necessary for them? And then timing. Timing is everything. When do you want to accomplish this outcome? What is the timeline? And, include different milestones along the way. Is this a one-time engagement? Is it a series of engagement, or is it ongoing over a period of time? Is it the appropriate time to introduce it to your constituents? Is it too soon? Is it too late? Or should you just not do it at all, right? So those are all factors that you must consider with timing. And of course, please put your questions or thoughts in the chat. And of course, we're going to have Q&A, of course. One of the things that are so super important, a lot of times organizations want to do an outreach, community outreach, right? But they haven't reached within. And this is so critical. And I'll tell you why. So we have a project we're doing with a county down in South Florida. And we reached out to another department to help us, particularly the library, to help us get the word out. Well, the employees at the library didn't even know about this water conservation initiative that's a part of their county, and was initially giving us pushback like, well, I don't think this is a county project. And it's like, no, it's a county project. It's one of your department. It's part of your environmental department. And so the thousands of employees that work for that county had not been briefed on their own water conservation initiative, right? So here it is. There's no awareness within the organization. Ceci, feel free to chime in at any time as I'm running through these. There's no awareness within the organization. So it's very important that before you launch a community awareness campaign or engagement campaign, that team members, staff, and departments are trained and that they understand what's happening, because they are also your constituents. They live and play in your communities, and they should know about these different initiatives that are happening. So training of staff appropriately and providing them the tools and resources, so that way when they go out, they're an ambassador and hopefully a champion of the initiative that you're doing to engage the community. Understand cultural triggers of your audiences. And I put in, just Black Panther because it's, such a popular movie. And we've had instances where we've had like a city that they may do a movie night, and one movie night may get 10 people, but when they did Black Panther, it got hundreds of people, right? Because of just the cultural trigger, the pride, the sense of community that one movie brought out, and people wanted to come out and celebrate and dress up in costumes and, you know, just be a part of this. And this was, you know, like a movie on a lawn type of situation, right? But it was a great audience builder. It was a great cultural trigger for that audience because they could relate. Whereas previously, the previous showings were not as diverse, did not have as much attendance. But here was this culture trigger that brought out a different community to participate in this event that they probably didn't even know was happening before, or it was just not of interest for whatever reason. Optimization of customer facing communication. So making sure that the information that's communicated internally is well communicated and received internally, but it also has what it needs to be well received externally. Establish matrix of success. Look for short and medium and long-term return on investments, which we're going to talk more about ROI for your organizations. And then assigning your resources. A lot of times, organizations don't allocate proper financial resources or human resources to effectively and successfully have a good community engagement program. It's like an afterthought, literally an afterthought most times. And it's not until a community is upset about something that it's like, oh my God, we need to do outreach. We need to engage the community. Well, that's sometimes a day too late. And now you have to expend resources instead of, you know, having that planned into the budget and into staffing before launching a campaign or before realizing that you need more just ongoing, consistent community engagement. And then lastly, making sure your organization has an emotional connection to the community. Are you speaking in language and in culture with your community? Communities are becoming more and more diverse, not only ethnically, but, you know, by just different interests, but making sure that, you know, it's inclusive of, is it accessible? Whether it's your website, is it ADA compliant? Is it your how you just develop your materials? And Ceci's going to talk a little bit more about that when we get into the tactics, but is it accessible? Do you have interpreters around? Do you have translators? Things like that. Walk the talk, engage in creating a two-way dialogue. So don't just create from your organization where you're just going to talk to, you want to talk with the community, right? And get them to be able to give you dialogue back. And then lastly, designate a champion and engage key stakeholders within the organization. So within the organization, you want people that can champion and go out and speak on behalf of whatever the initiative that you're putting out. Okay, so effective outreach involves 5 steps here. We talked a little bit about understanding your audience, developing solutions, which we're going to run through some solutions and tactics. So whatever that plan is, develop the plan and the solutions, and then develop the messaging. Messaging is so important, and we're going to give you some examples of how messaging is critical and how you have to create like top layer messaging and then really drill down messaging for your segmented audiences. And then you want to connect with them. And we'll talk about some tactics on how to connect. And then lastly, engage. And the engagement is that two-way, ongoing engagement. All right. How will you communicate? So here's some ways. We start with research. This is really, really important. And Ceci's going to talk about data shortly. But research can come in different formats. through focus groups, surveys, charrettes, listening tours, walking tours, visioning sessions, and so much more. So you want to be able to get as much primary research as possible. Of course, secondary research like the census and other data that's collected from other entities, universities, and other providers is great. And you want to utilize that and do some comparisons, but there's nothing like having your own primary research that you can customize and get the information you need to make sure that what you're trying to accomplish, your goals and objectives, is met through collecting the proper research. Messaging, branding, we love, of course, with marketing, we love creating campaigns. We love creating easy to understand messaging that's relevant and that people can easily remember and connect to. And then we create great branding and great storytelling around it and great tactics to actually communicate it. So that's another way. And then what should your messaging have, right? It should appeal to the target audience. It should communicate the value that's being offered. It should reflect the reality of the business or organization. It should differ from if there is competition or opposition. So there's competition depending on if what you're communicating, or if it's an initiative that could be very controversial, there could be opposition, right? So differentiate from the competition or the opposition, leverage against the competitors or opposers' message, use unique and snazzy words, communicate benefits before features, and message consistent across the board. So I'll let Ceci kind of go into some of our tactics and data.
Sure, thanks so much. And I put in the chat over here, please feel free to post anything in the chat if it's, a question or a thought or anything, that helps to get the conversation started. So when we think about how we're going to communicate, it's really important to remember that relevance is key. And Anne-Marie has used the term relevance or relevant a number of times so far. So a message that is relevant is going to be a message that is taken in, right? That is engaged with. And that's what we want. For any communications campaign, we want people to engage with our messaging. So, and that can take a variety of roles, right? So an engagement with a campaign, that could be a click on a social media post. It can be someone saving a print ad or whatever that might be, right? So we've got to make sure that we understand that our messaging has to be relevant. So we're endeavoring to deliver the right message to the right person at the right time via the right channel. And this is one thing that we really live by, that I live by. And that's actually, I can't take credit for that. That's a little thing from my colleague, Lee Gallagher, who wrote a book called Precision Marketing. And you can look that up on Amazon or anything if you'd like to, if you're nerdy like we are and you'd like to purchase the book. But really, in all of these campaigns and all communications campaigns, we're trying to deliver that right message to the right person at the right time via the right channel. So if we kind of think about that as a foundational concept, right? When we look at how are we going to communicate, whatever this is, right? Whatever the event, whatever the program, the initiative is. So how are we going to create this targeted campaign development, right? How are we going to develop this campaign to make sure that we're delivering that right message to that right person at the right time via the right channel? What is going to be the right way to speak about this particular event or initiative? What are the right images that are going to be compelling to the people we're trying to reach? what should that website or what should that email, what should that collateral material say that is really going to make that right person stop and say, oh, okay, I've got to figure out more about whatever this is. And you can see here in this bulleted list, right, we have a lot of different channels. It's important to remember that depending on the community you're trying to reach and engage with, depending on the type of event, there might be a wide variety of communications channels that you're going to want to use. And we have learned this, I have learned this over and over again, that, you know, there are people that say, oh, you know, print is dead, right? And it's all digital, or, you know, these kind of blanket statements. But really, you know, what we continually find is that there is no communications channel that is quote unquote dead. It's just about what population are you trying to reach? What is the type of event or initiative that you're talking about? So we have to keep a very open mind about what channels we're using when we are communicating about a particular event or initiative or whatever it might be. So sorry, I went off on a little diatribe there. So we have here in this bulleted list. So determining how you are going to be able to effectively communicate with your target audiences is really the first step, because that is the foundational knowledge, right? If I'm trying to reach out and communicate with, let's say, I'll take my own cohort. So like a mom of young children, I might call out different things. I might speak a little bit differently to my fellow peers, right, than if I was talking to another group of people. So all of these things here are super important to remember. You know, how will you communicate? To whom are you communicating? Thank you, Anne Marie. My screen just had a delay. All right. So when we're talking about different channels, social media, grassroots engagement, community partnerships, PR, you know, media relationships, right? PR, all these various things. It definitely comes back to what is the message that we're trying to deliver and who is the right audience for that message. So we're going to talk a little bit, we're going to bring in a case study in a few minutes about an initiative that I worked on with Anne Marie prior to working at Mosaic. And I'll say that through that initiative, I learned that we all come in with a lot of assumptions. We come in with a lot of assumptions of what channels work, how people want to be communicated with, right? But we don't necessarily know that for sure. And sometimes those assumptions can be challenged. So when we're looking at this list here that's on the screen, think about social media, think about grassroots engagement, think about community partnerships that maybe you're not currently utilizing or haven't utilized in the past. Think about media outlets that you maybe have not connected with in the past, and are they or could they be effective for the group that you're trying to reach? And of course, you heard Anne Marie talk about market research, right? The data doesn't lie. So if you have a lot of assumptions, if your team is wondering sort of where to start, right? Market research is always a really good starting point, right? Doing surveys, doing focus groups, you know, going out in the community to make sure that what your assumptions are correct, and maybe they're not correct. And that's okay as well, right? We want to be proven wrong. And then moving on from that, so talking about ROI. So we obviously, you know, for any campaign, any initiative, we're thinking about, you know, is this worth it? So make sure that you identify what those levels of efficacy are for your particular campaign. So when you're measuring ROI, no campaign is the same, right? So maybe ticket sales are the end conversion, maybe an attendance is the end conversion, maybe, somebody volunteering is something that you want people to do, right? Think about how you're going to measure those things and how you're actually going to gather analytics to make sure that you've got that data in your pocket, right? So you want to be able to say, okay, we had X number of dollars in ticket sales. We had Y number of people that attended. We got 20 testimonials or quotes from a particular event. How are we going to gauge the efficacy of this particular initiative? These are all super, super important for us to do. And it doesn't mean that it's complicated. It just means you've got to say, okay, so we're going to gauge the efficacy by, this many testimonials, this number of people in attendance, and then we're going to hold ourselves to those numbers. And exactly. So what we kind of just said here is, what is your KPI? So KPI is like marketing speak, right? It's key performance indicator. What is that main KPI? What action do you want people to take in your campaign? It's important to remember, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, but it's important to remember that when you are communicating with people, you are bringing them along on a journey, right? And each step is just an incremental part of that journey. So if we break it down and we think about it, so let's say you send an email to, your list about a particular event, right? The first step in that journey is actually not someone clicking, not someone attending, but it's just someone opening that email, right? So there are tons of incremental. So they open the email, they read the email, they are enticed by the email, they click through, and then maybe they get to that end result at some point. So it's really important to remember that we've got lots of incremental conversions, steps, KPIs, right, along the way to that end result where we want people to go.
So to close out this segment before we get into the case studies, the main thing that you need to remember is that all groups are not communicated to in the same manner. So to make everything effective, meaningful, inclusive, and engaging, you want to make sure that you're speaking their language. And that's both in a literal sense as well as in a relevance sense, right? Is it in the language they speak, whether it be English, Spanish, or if they need to be interpreted, if you need an interpreter for whatever reason, or in the language of relevance. Is this even relevant to this particular person or audience? Go where they go. This is critical. This is why you got to understand behaviors, interests, and have more data and research. Got to go to the community. A lot of times people create initiatives and want the community to just come to them or come to their venue, but there may be other barriers that prevent them from coming to you or to your venue or to your campus. We have a client in Broward County who created a neighborhood campus for their college because there are communities that have challenges, and we did the research for them: transportation, childcare, working 2-3 jobs. So to commute to an hour to one of their other campuses was just not reasonable, but they did want education. They wanted to further their education. So as a result of the data, the college then put courses in targeted community neighborhoods through community centers. So go where they go. Be consistent, repetition, recognition, branding, messaging, information should be consistent. Be flexible. So that means that if something's not working, which means if you're tracking your ROI and your KPIs that we just talked about, you'll know where you need to make improvements or adjustments to messaging or tactics. So be flexible in your tactics, right? Be open. Engagement and engaging with community is an experience where you learn so much so quickly. And you have to be open to the possibilities as well as the challenges that you may have to overcome, and be ready to change. That's what makes, behaviors change, technology change. Everything is always evolving. So as an organization, you have to be ready to evolve and change as everything else is changing along the way. So that way you're not doing the same thing and getting the same results as we started with. So we're going to take you through just a couple of case studies, and then we'll take some questions as well. So this is a campaign we're actually currently in the middle of, the city of North Miami in Florida. It's a P3 campaign, and it's a public-private partnership initiative. And so when we were engaged, we were asked to, go out and educate the community about P3s. And we were like, absolutely not. And this P3 was, the P3 model is a real estate development model where public entities such as the city partners with private sector community to develop the city's assets, and it saves the city money on the front end, but they pay over time. That's the short of it. Well, the average citizen doesn't know any of those technicalities, and it's like, well, what does that even mean for them? And they're like, well, it's this new city hall and it's more expanding police station, expanding the museum, et cetera, et cetera. So what we decided to do was create something that was not relative to a P3. We created what we called a C3. And we created these community chats to talk about how they connect to the downtown that is looking to be reimagined, right? So we created Downtown Nomi Connects as the brand and the overall message, and we're connecting them to 3 C's, which is community, the places that connect us, and we was able to tell them why, whether it's access and more efficiency in their government services, enhancements of public safety, more housing, more parking, more walkability, more green space, right? That's the community. That's the first C. The second C was culture, the experiences that connect the people to their downtown, their MOCA, which is their museum, arts, culinary experiences, community events, places for cultures to gather and celebrate. And then the last C was commerce. What connects them, the amenities, retail, small business, the growth of their existing businesses, commercial development, job creation. So how all of that connects. That sounds much more relevant to people than educating them about a P3 model that's really just an agreement between the city and the public sector, that the citizens could really, not that they don't care, they care because if they want to know how their dollars are being spent. However, they can relate more to the 3 C's instead of the P3s. So that's just one example. And then, of course, them understanding what the benefits of the project would do in a very, simplified way, quick bullet points of them understanding this is how this project could benefit you. So that's one example of a case study. And this was a recent community meeting we did where you can see we had groups break out, and they were able to create their vision in different groups of the 3 C's, community, culture, commerce, and what they wanted to see in their downtown with redevelopment, what they wanted to experience in their downtown, and how it related to each of the 3 C's. So that's just one, example, and people really engaged. They got to really give their feedback and input. And then we also conducted is conducting a survey. So far, we have close to 2,000 responses with the survey as well. So that's one example, and I'm going to allow Ceci to give you the second case study, and then we'll go into Q&A with Palm Beach Opera. Ceci?
Yes. Hi. And I was actually just writing back to Alicia in the chat. I don't know, Anne Marie, if you wanna answer her question, but she brings up a really good point that I think we can mention now, is that all of the tactics that we're talking about here really can be done at any budget level, right? So if you've got dedicated money to do this kind of work, great. But if not, it can still be done. And that is a really great segue into the case study that we're going to talk about right now with Palm Beach Opera. So, I don't normally reference former job titles, but in this case, it's relevant. So I was the director of communications at Palm Beach Opera for a number of years. And I knew that my audience in the opera house did not accurately reflect the community we served, right? It did not accurately represent where we were based in South Florida. So I knew that we had to make a change because opera is for everyone. Opera is, well, I might be biased here. My degree is in music. I was a classical singer in a former life. I think opera is super cool. I hope everyone here on this webinar, if you've not already been to the opera, you should go to the opera. It's amazing. But we knew that we needed to bring opera to the community. And we partnered with Mosaic. So this is before I started working at Mosaic, but I reached out to Anne Marie and I said, look, my opera audience does not look like the audience that it should be. Right? People in this community do not understand how awesome opera is. So we did a multi-year campaign called Do Something Different. And I say that, or kind of how this is tying in, right, about the budget topic that we were just talking about, is when we first decided to do the campaign, I had $0 in budget. I moved, a few $100s here, a few $100s there to kind of cobble together a little bit of a budget to kind of try this out. So the first sort of the proof of concept of this was not with a giant budget or with a grant or anything like that. It became a 3-year campaign like you see here, because we did provide proof of concept. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to say, look, we want to bring opera to the community. How do we do that in a meaningful way? What are the real tactics that we can use? And how are we going to evaluate this campaign, this initiative? So you can see here, so we had significant community impact, which I'm super happy to say. We used a variety of tactics to demonstrate the efficacy, right, of this campaign. So yes, surveys, yes, in-person and digital, right? We used social media. We tracked social media engagement. We did a number of different targeting campaigns to the communities that we were trying to reach. We did various education programs with school children in the community. Of course, we looked at ticket sales to see, were people actually coming and buying tickets? We did some special programming as part of the campaign, which was very successful. So again, when we're talking about, how are you going to measure the efficacy, right? We're talking here about sort of kind of high level things, but keep in mind, as we're talking here, think about what might work for your particular city, for your particular organization, and what that might look like. So at Palm Beach Opera, we knew that we already had a strong initiative for education programs. And so it was very natural for us to say, okay, we are going to just kind of dovetail this program into those educational activities that we're already doing, right? So it really became a very integrated approach, which I think is super useful for everyone. So we had already programs, concerts in the classroom. We would have artists going into the classroom and performing and doing interactive things, right? We had artists doing story times and other concerts and things like that. And we already had a children's performance that was happening. So making sure that you are able to look at what you're already doing and dovetailing or bring in these new initiatives into those existing activities is really important. So partnerships are super important. Oh my gosh, stop on this slide. So Anne-Marie is controlling the slide deck, but stop on this slide. This is like one of my favorite slides ever. And every time I see this photo, it is so great, right? So every time we would do one of these initiatives at any school, any library, community center, right? We would see these children that we were reaching really just get so engaged and involved, which as an opera company, right, was super important for us because we were making those meaningful engagements to say to the children here, we're talking about education. So to these children here, this is what opera is. This is, why opera singers sound the way they do. This is how you can connect with a story. And then the people on the other end were always so engaged, so excited. They had a different level of knowledge about what we were doing. Okay, fine. I guess we can move on from that slide, even though it's my favorite. So we did, in talking about KPIs and talking about efficacy, right? We did have a ticket sale, a ticket sale goal. So, we did certainly look at sales, discount codes, other types of partnerships, marketing partnerships, all of that, right? And that's very, very important, to look at, and making sure that you know what those KPIs are before you start with the campaign. Go ahead, Anne-Marie. Sorry, I am looking at the time. I don't mean to feel like we're being rushed, but I'm keeping my eye on the time so that we can get through and make sure that we have enough time for questions. But so at the opera, we did a number of different activities for special programming. We really latched on to some of the things that some of the misconceptions that people might have about opera, like, what do you wear? Are people, are opera singers regular people, right? These kinds of things. So in conjunction with Mosaic, we did a number of different campaigns. So we did an event that was a fashion show, that is what to wear to the opera. And that was like possibly the coolest thing I've ever done or been involved with. It was so, so cool. And then we also had one of our singers, Musang Pungwana, who is from South Africa. We did a sit down, and Anne-Marie actually interviewed him and to talk about his upbringing in South Africa, and really showcasing him as a kind of a real person, right? You see him up on the stage, but opera singers are real people as well.
And I just want to point out, so all of these, we really targeted and worked with the African-American community, as well as the Hispanic community. So we had, we partnered with fraternities, we partnered with a African-American Heritage Museum, which is where we did the fashion show, and we had Black designers feature their designs and couture designs and fashion for an evening with the gentleman from South Africa. We partnered with the Artist Showcase of the Palm Beaches, which was, an organization that really showcased and highlighted, Black artists and Black art. So everything was very intentional. And I think the culmination of the program was when we were able to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the, oh my God, was it Ebony Corral? I'm sorry.
Yes, the Ebony Corral. Yes.
The Ebony Corral 25th anniversary. And we did a merging of opera and spirituals. And we created this, one show, one heritage, one event. And it was just an amazing evening where this had never happened before in the region. So that's how we got really creative and really out of the box. But again, it was meaningful, and it really, like, people still talk about their experience with the opera till this day through those different campaigns. So we wanted to give you kind of two different perspectives, kind of like the, community engagement about a particular like initiative that can be very controversial. But then here's another community engagement that was more about culture and art and just really connecting the two and to show that, everyone can be interested in something. It's really about how you reach out. It's about how you engage in the messaging that you deliver to them. So we want to open it up for questions.
Yes. And thank you, Anne Marie. I think while we're waiting for some questions to come in, I think that the common refrain here is, we put meaningful engagement right in the title of this session, and that's really what it is. Right? It's so many organizations and people and companies, they say they're going to engage, they say they're going to do these initiatives, whatever, but it's not super meaningful and intentional. And that's really the key here.
Yeah, it has to be. And going back to Alicia's question about building capacity, like Ceci said, she started small. When we started with the opera, it was a pilot initiative. I think the initial budget was like $7,500 for about a 6-month engagement. And of course, that was then. I would not, accept that payment today. I'm just playing. But as an agency, for us, it was something different. It was fun, and we wanted to do it. We wanted to bring that experience to the community that we serve, because as an agency, we have community constituents that trust us as an organization to bring them meaningful experiences and initiatives. And so Ceci started that with a $7,500 budget. So we had to be very, very creative because we couldn't spend the money on advertising. We didn't have an ad budget. So we relied heavily on those community partnerships where it was like, okay, well, who are the professional associations? Who are the civic organizations, such as fraternities and sororities? But, where are the Hispanic lawyers associations? Where are the Black lawyer associations? Where are the doctors? What are they a part of, right? And so we literally engaged those community partners in order to, what are the other nonprofits that serve the minority community? We engaged the Urban League, so we engaged those partners to say, let's do something different and discover opera. Co-host this event with us. So we partnered with restaurants. Hey, we're going to bring all these people here. Can you sponsor the appetizers? And we'll do a special for them to stay for dinner, right? I mean, we had to be very creative. Alicia?
So I'm going to kind of diverge a little bit, but so in my organization, we do partner with a lot of people, and you know, we only have three full-time employees, so it's kind of very, very small. In my neighborhood, which is just down the street where I work, we have kind of had this issue where, and I hate to use this phrase, but we have a lot of dinosaurs in our community organization who just will not, like, they will not budge on things like social media outreach or doing Zoom meetings. They want everything to be in person. They don't see, and I get it, you know, it's a different age group, you know, the way that they ran things traditionally for the past 40, 50 years is kind of where they're at. And they don't really change what's worked for them in the past. But as my neighborhood changes, when I moved in 7 years ago, it was mostly retirees. Now we're seeing an influx of young families with children. You know, people want playgrounds, they want dog parks, they want all these things. But people, when I talk to my neighbors, because I actually do go to the civic association, and I say, oh yeah, you know, like you should come to the meetings. They're like, I didn't even know there was a civic association in our neighborhood because their outreach is so poor. So I guess, like, you know, in your experience, have kind of dealt with that, where you're kind of like pulling people forward into modern times, and then also, how do you, like, you know, because you don't want to come in and kind of step on toes and, you know, create enemies, right? Like, you want to work with these people. So have you found like constructive ways to kind of, you know, try to change how people engage? And you know, especially when you're talking about millennials who are social media, you know, centric. I actually said, like, I would meetings more often if it was on Zoom, but I'm a really busy person, and it's hard for me, you know, to 30 minutes in my car that takes the drive, which sounds pathetic.
Well, I mean, we can give you a perfect real life example that we're like in the middle of right now. So, well, they're all real life examples, but this one, what I mean, like from a changing perspective, like this is very like cutting edge. So metaverse, have you heard of the metaverse?
Yeah, it does not appeal to me, but yes, I've heard of it.
Okay, so we were engaged by a city last year that wanted to do a citywide marketing campaign, but the city manager, you know, was like, hey, you know, I want to do the traditional thing, but I want something that's a little different. I want something that's cutting edge. I want people to be able to engage with our city in a different way. And so we actually said, okay, great. We're going to build a traditional website. We're going to create all the traditional marketing and messaging. We're going to do all of that. But we're going to help you build the first virtual city in the metaverse. And it's going to be new. It's going to be different.
Actually.
And it's going to be, and it was a hard sell to some of the commissioners because we had to present this concept to the elected officials. And their biggest concern was, we have a lot of senior citizens. We can barely get them on social media. And now you're telling me you want them to put on these goggles, is what they call them. You want them to put on these goggles to interact with something in a metaverse. What is a metaverse, right? And so we said, listen, this is about education, right? Yes, we want to make sure, and we're going to make sure we make it fun and engaging, and we introduce it in a way where it's having them try something new. We're going to walk them through it. We're going to, you know, meet with a senior group that meets every week for bingo. We're going to meet with the senior group who does line dancing on Thursdays. We're going to show them how to use this technology, right? But we also have to think of the future, right? We have a lot of youth in the community who is into gaming. They've been into gaming for a while. And this is just another form of gaming, for lack of a better word, you know, Web3. But we had to convince them that this is future. It's putting your city on the map as a futuristic, cutting edge, you know, current, forward-thinking city. And we're also going to make sure that all of the communication from a traditional standpoint is there for those residents who still need the traditional communication. But we're also going to introduce it to your seniors and allow them to engage this way as well. And it has worked like a charm. Like, we've launched the first phase. Everybody loves it. They got a lot of media coverage and buzz. And now we're going into the next phase where we're going to be building in more gamification. We're going to be building in more experiences. People can experience different events in this metaverse. So it's probably a 3 to 5 year process to really get the, masses on board, but at least we're taking these small steps. So I say that to say, you just have to find a happy medium where you can definitely say, hey, we're going to incorporate traditional means of communication, because like Ceci said, there's no such thing as like print is dead or this form of communication is dead. No, it's not dead. And if people have a preference, like, I still buy books because I like to touch the pages and flip through and do all of that, right? But I also have Audible, that I listen to the same books that I've purchased in the audio version as well, because I want to hear it on the go. So we can do both, and it's just about compelling that audience that we're able to do both. But let's not be behind time. Let's remain on the cutting edge. Let's remain innovative. Let's make sure that we have the tools in place to communicate to all of our audience in these various platforms. Ceci, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's that last sentiment that you just shared. Let's make sure that we have the tools in place, right? And what we talked about earlier, right message, right person, right time, right channel, right? That the channel that is the right channel for a certain group may be different or new from what has been done before. And this is the state of communications that we're in right now, right? We've got to use a lot of different channels. We have to use a lot of different platforms because, for some things, yes, print works really well. For other things, yes, TikTok works really well, or the metaverse, or, whatever it might be. So we just have to be mindful of that and sort of keep up with those trends and with how people are consuming information. Yeah. And it doesn't always take money, right? To get to have a really good Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever channel or presence, that really doesn't take money. It's really just about time and effort in creating the content that those people like to see or will like to see, right? So, thinking about not all of these things are, equate directly to budget or money, right? Some things are just kind of staff time and effort related.
I feel like I should invite you guys to one of our civic association meetings so that you can very eloquently persuade them, because I tried with doing hybrid meetings, and it's not just me.
Sure.
I guess maybe 5 years from now it'll be a different.
Hey, we're happy to attend any meeting that you'd like us to attend, but and I think we should say too, and I say this often, right? If I, from a personal note, right, if I can make new techniques and new technologies and kind of new ways work in Palm Beach County, Florida, marketing opera, which just in its own right, you can imagine the demographic that is the core demographic for, that was my audience. So if I can make these things work there, we can make them work in other places as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Please feel free to ask us any questions that you have, Brian.
Actually, I will like you to also speak at a university in a planning program. Prairie View A&M University has a community development. They specialize in community development, and participatory practices is one of the most important things in helping develop communities. And I actually love to do the exact same presentation. They School of Architecture seminars. So they switch every month. One is an architecture presentation, one is a planning presentation. And I'll actually love for y'all to present there sometime in the fall of next year. So if you just throw me your contact information, well, we will talk after the conference.
Absolutely. I did private message you or respond to your message, Brian. So I included, let me know if you got it. I included both my email and Ceci's email,
Yes.
which it's Anne Marie. For those anyone who wants our information, please let us. We'll share it. If Ceci wants to share it in the general chat, that's fine.
Yeah.
We're happy to, and that's great, Brian, because we do a lot of work with the AEC community. Especially on infrastructure and redevelopment projects, real estate investment projects in, communities. And a lot of times people say, not in my backyard. There are those who really want it because they understand the economic development side of it. But then there are people that's like, no, it's going to affect my property value, or no, I just moved to this neighborhood and I like it just the way it is, or I've been living here for 50 years and I like my neighborhood just the way it is. So how dare you come in and try to redevelop something or add, a new building. So, or even, as populations expand and grow, a community may say, well, why do we need a new school here? Well, because your community is growing by 8,000 residents, and the other schools are bursting at the seams. But so being able to engage in those dialogues to really help people understand, and you're not going to ever get 100% consensus and buy-in from a community. But if you can achieve at least 75 to 80% of consensus and buy-in from a community with those types of efforts, then that is a huge success rate. I mean, sometimes we can just get 55%. That's a huge success rate, right? But it's very important with the work that you're with that department, because they're going to face that as they go out into different communities and design buildings and structures and things like that, where there are going to be those who love it. I'll give an example. We have a client where the building was beautiful. Everyone loved it, but they hated the garage, and the garage needed to be a 10-story garage because of the size of the building. However, the community said, well, we don't want a garage that looks like a garage. How can you make this garage not look like a garage? It needs to look like the building, right? How do you make this parking structure look like the building? Because we just don't want anything on our main thoroughfare, that's the entryway into the city or the exit of the downtown, to look like a parking structure. So it was a lot of community engagement, a lot of different designs and renderings before there was a yes from the community and a yes from the elected officials. So it's a very important work.
Both of y'all sound like a planner.
We're not planners, believe it or not, but we engage with a lot of planners. And so understanding the language the planners speak and then understanding the community side is I guess an asset for us, Ceci.
Yeah. Messaging.
Yeah.
Right? Messaging. Like right message, right person, right?
Yeah.
Knowing how to shift that messaging and shift how we talk when we're talking about various projects or initiatives. Yeah.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Anything we can answer? Any situations you all are facing that you may need just a little tip on?
I just want to say, you can't see it, but I actually have two Zooms up right now because you have like 30 people listening to y'all also in another room. So.
Oh. Well, we'd love to take questions from them as well if they have any. Hi.
I'm in another room walking with a laptop, so I don't know if they're going to ask any questions, but they're welcome.
Okay. Well, they're welcome to ask questions. Thank you, David. David, I don't know if you had any questions or if you just clapping.
Nah, I was just saying good job, but for the most part, for me, I'm just kind of doing my role. I'm a law school registrar over at North Carolina Central University, and so I'm kind of just got here in June, so I'm still trying to learn the community here myself and trying to figure out how can I make a community with my students. first before I start branching out in the community. So, but great job to you guys. Just want to kind of say that.
Well, thank you. Well, it definitely starts internal, but the same, even if you're not doing the marketing methods, the same thing applies. You know, get to know your students, understand them, understand their why. Why are they there in your classroom? And what's, you know, and I've been a classroom professor as well, so I love interacting with college students. And I taught small business and entrepreneurship. So it was understanding their why. Why is this important to them? You know, what's their means of wanting to be an entrepreneur or wanting to start that business? So it's super important you can use the same tactics in your classrooms to build community in your classroom and before you go out. Kelly? Oh.
Hi, good morning. I know I was in and out for a little bit, but appreciated your presentation. I am an assistant professor at Georgia College in Georgia, but also do some consulting work. So just want to echo what you said about the classroom and building community, and have my favorite class is actually working with nonprofit partners. But my question is actually in regard to a project that I'm working on. And the short version is we are trying to move people to a call to action. And so I'm just curious your thoughts on, like, we have a case building document and, you know, different written things that people may or may not read. But how do you actually, if you have any thoughts or suggestions on getting leaders, nonprofits, education leaders, state leaders to actually commit and move to action?
Are you able to share what the exact sort of call to action is, you know, what the scope of the engagement is that you're looking for?
Sure, absolutely. It's in regard to post-secondary education, and basically over the last 20 years, the huge drop of Black student enrollment. And so highlighting that issue, pointing it was exacerbated by COVID, but it's been happening for 20 years. And so really thinking about ways to support Black learners in 2-year, 4-year post-secondary opportunities.
Well, my first thought is you just named about 4 different segments of the population. Yeah. So I would, if you may have an overarching strategy and message, but I would break that down per segment. So for example, for your elected body, why is this important to them? Why should they care, right? From a legislative standpoint. If it's like a state legislature, for example, will the school lose money because of the lack of enrollment, right? You know, how is it going to affect them from a legislative standpoint? Or if it's your local governing body, how does that affect the local body? Well, it goes back to economics. If you don't have, you can create a brain drain if you don't have students that are excelling and graduating, right? Or you create a workforce issue, right? So I'm just giving you an example. So if you're able to drill down per audience the impact that this particular issue is going to have on that particular person, then you can now craft your message. So don't send a generic letter. You tweak the letter with that little bit of differentiator for that person or that audience so that they can say, oh, and make that their headline. Like this is going to impact our workforce 10 to 15 years from now because we need an educated workforce for this reason, right? So that's just an example. The rest of the call to action can remain the same, but you got to have that message that really speaks to them and make it relevant to them. So that would be my first suggestion off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean, remember, right message, right person, right? This kind of segmentation, you know, segmentation is like a fancy kind of marketing word, right? But really, you know, tailoring the message to the people you're speaking to, you know, this is really the core of, I think, what's going to help that. Exactly what Anne-Marie just said, right? You know, this approach, you know, this approach is thousands of years old, right? So making sure that anytime you're sending out a communication, no matter what channel it is, if it's digital, if it's traditional, whatever, if it's just one-on-one, right? Maybe you're just having a conversation with someone, making sure that you ask yourself, am I saying this in the right way for this person to engage or understand?
Mm-hmm. And the other thing too, and if you don't know what that button is for them, interviews are really good.
Mm-hmm.
Before especially even working in the public sector, before we start a city manager can hire us, and the first thing I'm going to say, well, I need to interview your elected body around this. So can you set up one-on-one meetings with me so I can understand how this particular topic relates to them? Because I need to know if they're going to support it. I need to know if I got 3 votes, 5 votes, however many votes, right? I need to know, is this something that they even care about? So same thing with your key constituents that you're looking to reach. Set up some one-on-one calls with them and understand if they even understand how this impacts them. And that'll also help you frame your feedback from them, will also help you frame your message that you're going to drill down for each audience. And then I can't guarantee you, but I will say that if you try that method, you will see some different results.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's helpful. We're planning on having a convening in a few months. And so we were thinking about including some partners in advance to help plan things. So what you're saying, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Don't do it's easy. I tell you, everyone, in communications, it's easy to create a blanket message. It's easy to create, what we call cookie cut communications. It's easy to do that. The hard part is like really drilling down and really thinking and being thoughtful about your audience and how these different issues impact them and why they should care, right? That's where it gets a little more complicated, and you have to take a little more time, a little more research, and a little more thoughtfulness. And then once you do that, you'll see different results. Brian, see your hand raised.
Oh, yes, I forgot that I had a question. So being a planner, I deal a lot with community engagement, especially trying to get community buy-in. So one of the models I follow that if you give the community, if you speak the right language, you will not only educate the community, but you also get them to understand what you're trying to do, and then they're able to look at that, and then because a lot of time it's misinformation. The reason why they are against certain things is the city and municipality is not communicating right, like exactly what y'all said. But one of the issues, so I used to work for the federal government. I used to design military bases. I was working for the DOD. And one of the reasons why I left is because on the military side is whatever the base general wants. So they didn't care about anything the community wanted because it was whatever they said to do. But now working on the municipal side, I'm dealing with, I work in a municipality right outside the Houston area, and one of the biggest issues we're having is that we have a lot of development, a lot of subdivisions being built, and the community is mostly upper middle class citizens, and they do not want residential apartments, multi-use, or certain type of even residential lower income homes. So just trying to communicate with them and them wanting one vision for the city versus with the economic forces there, and just trying to communicate. And we have hundreds of subdivisions, and trying to communicate with each one, all of them calling to the planning office, trying to know what's being built. So so we started an initiative to put it on the website. We call it if they see a problem, we use something called click fix. They see it, they write it and click it, and then we will try to, that was code enforcement, but what they're trying to do is we have a lot of deed restricted neighborhoods in Texas. So we are they want us to regulate their needs, but vice versa. Those are private subdivisions. It's just a lot of drama. So it's communication. So what is y'all opinion in dealing with neighborhood associations, especially all different types of neighborhood associations, especially specifically those NIPSE communities?
Yeah, ooh, that's challenging, and I tell you why. Because so first there's changing perception. There's a misperception that if you create, let's just say the buzzword affordable housing, or mixed use housing, where you may have a developer that does market rate and may have a percentage that's reserved for affordable or workforce housing. There are people who are against that because for whatever reason, their perception is that it's going to bring down their property value, it's going to cause, et cetera, in their neighborhood or their community or their complex, which is just not the case, right? So it's really being able to change that perception to say that, everyone needs housing, right? No matter what. So one of the things, we did a campaign in South Florida because they were trying to pass a housing bond, and it was, housing for all, right? We're all impacted by, the basic necessity of having a roof over our head, right? And we can all add value to each other building this community. So I think it's, the short of it is we first identify your overarching messaging for whether it's redevelopment that you want in your community and why it's important, and then looking at those neighborhoods because they are grouped by, let's just say, income status, right? That's the reality. So what's important to that income group? And then also try to understand, why are they so against it? Is it just the negative perception? And if it is the negative perception, then find the factual statistics to show that, for example, when you do have someone who may be low income that lives in a middle income community, it gives the opportunity to lift that low income family up because now they are exposed to more positive opportunities, more positive experiences. They're networking with their neighbors, where now they may have the opportunity to actually get a better job or a better education experience. So now you are able to bring that particular family up over time to the level of the middle income family. And statistics show that it works, right? So it's getting that information, those statistics, those studies, to be able to try to work to change the perception that the middle income families may have about mixing with lower income families, right? So it's not an overnight change. You got your hand full with that one, but it can be done through proper messaging and proper strategies. And you got to go to the neighborhood, meet with their HOA presidents, meet with their civic association presidents, go and make presentations, build trust. The biggest issue with government and people is trust. So the first thing any municipality has to do across the board is build trust, create transparent methods, and make sure that people feel like their government is transparent and they can see and hear everything. So the website is a great start. It's a wonderful start. That campaign, See Click Fix, great start. But you have to show transparency. You have to create ways to build trust with the community so that they trust the information you're bringing in. They trust the methods that you're bringing. I hope that answered your question, Brian.
Look, I'm writing notes down while you're speaking.
Okay.
Yeah, it was really, I mean, y'all presentation was between scale of 1 through 10, I'll give it a 15. I mean, it was great. So
what? Off the charts.
love the y'all, even the backgrounds y'all have on y'all Zoom and the whole entire presentation. Can you go to the cover page just because I just want to see it again? It was pretty great.
Oh yeah, let me see. I don't even know how I stopped sharing, but I did, but. Oh. I'm sure there was a better way to do this.
Yeah,
Okay.
just having the community in the background of the entire, and then talking about community engagement, and you see the community engagement. Even I know you use the opera, but seeing the community is just, it gives that certain image. So how you was talking about the words you use and the language, photos within your presentation also show what you were speaking on.
Thank you. Thank you for the feedback. And we should have, I don't know if COMPA has a evaluation. I hope they do. But thank you so much. And please share any feedback, anything we can do better as well. Let us know, or share the feedback for COMPA, and hopefully they share that with us. But thank you for the 15 rating. Hey, I don't think we ever got that one, Ceci.
I also want to say that I'm recording these for Professor Uzushukwu. So like they will be up on a YouTube page. So if you want to go back and reference something specifically, I'm sure that will be shared with the conference podcast.
Oh, that's great.
Awesome. Well, we have about 1 more minute. If you have another question, we have time for one more.
I'll just ask, have you guys found that, funding has been kind of tough this year with inflation? Because we've both within my organization and also my daughter's parents association board, and we're a nonprofit school. We've had a lot of trouble with, people kind of coming back to us going, we just don't have it in our budget right now to sponsor donate goods or things like that.
Yeah, budgets are being tightened much more. We have clients who are tightening budgets. So it is, we're feeling the effect on different ways. As an employer, I'm definitely feeling the effect just because of the inflation and the cost of living going up, but then, clients having tighter budgets. So it's a very tight rope that we're dancing from my perspective as well. But yeah, we're definitely seeing that.
Yeah. And I'll bring up again, just as a reminder, yeah, budgets are being tightened. People are looking more at line items in the bottom line, but a lot of the things that we talked about in this session, don't really require any money at all, or a lot of money, right? So keep in mind, don't let the thought of money or budget or grants or whatever deter you from trying to implement some of these
Tactics.
methods.
Yeah, it may take you a little more time, which just take your time and do it. If it takes you 3 months to implement one initiative, then it takes 3 months, right?
Yeah.
If you're budget limited. So just take your time, implement the tactics that you can within your budget and in the timeline that you're able to do it. And that's how you'll be able to build capacity. And don't be afraid to outsource. Even if it's not an agency, there are a lot of freelancers out there that can help with different things. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Please feel free to reach out to us and find us on LinkedIn as well.
Yes, I will.